So in Python, of course, one data type that you can have is a number, but the data type is not actually called number because you can have different types of numbers. You can have a data type called an integer, which of course is just a whole number, or you can have a float. And a float is any decimal number, even if it's a whole number 1.0, but it has a decimal point in, so that makes it a floating point number. In Python, it's as easy as you can imagine to define variables like this. So I'm going to create a float, which is going to be equal to 3.4. I'm going to create a int, which is going to be equal to 3. Both of those are valid numbers. This one's an integer, this one's a floating point number. Floats can have, of course, any level of decimals beyond that floating point, and they're called a float because that decimal point can kind of float up and down based on where you want the decimal point to be. So instead of being 3.45 so on, you could have it be the decimal point float down there and be 34589.8237. So that's the two main number types in Python. And as you can imagine, with numbers, you can do all kind of mathematical operations. So you can add two numbers using the add operator, and you could assign this to a variable if you wanted, something like that. And I'll run all this just to prove it works as I do it with my magic cells. So I run that. So there's the result. I can add numbers, I can divide them. Notice that results in a floating point number. I can do all other kind of things. I can subtract them, I can get negative numbers, I can multiply them together. And this one might not be so obvious, but use the asterisk to represent a multiplication. So there are many other operators as well. So you can do, for example, to the power of is 2 asterisks. So this represents 3 to the power of 4. You can do floor division with a double forward slash. And what that represents is the number of times which this number fits into this number. So it doesn't go in 3 is smaller than 4, so it doesn't go in any times. But if this was, for example, 16, the result would be 4, because you've got 4 4s in 16. And if the result was 15, it would be 3, because you can get 4 into 15 3 whole times. That's what floor division means. It's the largest number of these that can fit in whole into this big number. So what else is there? There is the modulo, which is kind of related to that. So the floor division gives you the number that fit in. The modulo with a percentage sign gives you the remainder. So here the remainder would be 3, because I can fit 4 into 15 with a remainder 3. So if I were to change that to something like that, then the remainder would be 1, because I can fit 4 into 17 4 times to give me 16, and then there'll be 1 left over, which is what the modulo gives you, and that's what the percentage sign represents when it's used as an operator. As is typical, you can have many operations in a calculation like this as well. So let's make it a little bit simpler. So I've got 2 times 4 plus 6. What does it give me? It gives me 14. And why is that? Well, that's because it does 2 multiplied by 4, which is 8, and then adds 6 to it. And it does these operations in the bid mass order. It does whatever's in brackets first, then it does indices, raising to the power and taking square roots and such. It does division after that, then multiplication, then addition, and then subtraction. So if I change this, so it was like this, then the output would be different, because now it's doing the brackets first. So that's the order of which calculations happen in. Other useful mathematical stuff that you might want to know about is there's some built-in functions like round. So if I round a floating point number, it's going to give me that to the nearest whole number. And that's a good enough summary to get started with, thanks. So there you've seen the 2 number types in Python and a few of the operations that you can do around them.